Hello, hello. We're live, friends. Hello. Hello, LinkedIn friends. Hello, friends watching us from where we are. Happy Monday or Tuesday, depending on who we're talking to. Very excited to be in today and very excited to be hosting today's conversation. Welcome, welcome. This is the How to Teach What You Know and Defend What You Create in the World of AI panel. My name is Parchelle Osumaré. I am the CEO of the Cultivated Joy Experiment, head cousin at the Business Cousins, experienced designer and strategist. It is my honor to get to host a crew in here today to talk a little bit about AI and this conversation that is so pertinent for us today. Let me introduce you all to who's in the room, and then we'll pop us into our conversation. So for starters, rounding us off is Miss Verity Craft, director at Intelligent Inc. Verity is a writer, book coach, and strategist who helps purpose-driven thought leaders write their best book. Not just any book. She supports authors in amplifying their message while protecting their authentic voice in an age of generative AI. Generative AI. Protecting voice in the age of generative AI. Welcome in, Verity, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited to have you here. I'm excited for this conversation. Also, we are welcoming in Erin Austin, founder of Think Beyond IP, a Harvard-educated attorney and strategic advisor. Erin helps thought leaders and creative entrepreneurs legally protect and ethically monetize their intellectual property. She's passionate about helping experts scale smart by owning the rights to their unique genius. Welcome in, Erin, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to this.
Again, I hope y'all are seeing what kind of conversation we're having today and who's in the room and why. Lastly, to introduce my love, Parchelle Osumaré, founder of the Authors Leverage, an executive learning producer and former high school teacher. Parchelle helps experts transform their books and their expertise into engaging digital learning experiences. They specialize in creating scalable learning assets, from digital workbooks to private podcasts, things that help experts teach what they know and protect what they have built. Welcome in, Parchelle.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad that this is happening.
Same. We've been plotting and scheming on this conversation in like quiet group chats for so long. I'm so glad we've made it out the group chat, fam. We made it here to the live. And I'm really excited to kind of bring in this conversation around AI from a lens of folks who are actively working with experts. Everyone on this call, we all can touch AI, and I'm sure everyone that's listening has experienced it in some ways. And so many of us are sitting with some of these questions, right? Around like, what does it mean for me? How am I using it really? Where do ethics come in? Does my IP have a home when we're in open source AI? I'm excited to dive a little bit into some of the thoughts that these experts have around this conversation, and happy to host said panel around it. And let's get into it. I want to start by grounding this conversation and kind of going round robin and asking a little bit of it how AI has actually influenced the work that you've been doing with experts and creators. I think, Verity, why don't we start off with you? Give me an idea for you. How do you feel like AI has started to influence your work with experts?
I think there's a few different ways. So first and foremost, it's forced us to really come up with what our take is on AI. So I think that, for us, we've had to figure out how do we use AI in the book writing process to make it better without losing what actually makes the book process powerful. And we're seeing it come through in a lot of different ways. Like we edit some books. Ideally, we work with people from the start of their book journey, but for some people, they come to us when they've already written their book. And we can tell when they've been written with AI versus when they haven't. So we're now having to address that in that editing process. But also, even if we're working with people from the beginning, they're trying to figure out how do they use this in a way that is ethical, in a way that still feels like it's theirs, in a way that, as I'm sure Erin will speak to, that they own and that it actually belongs to them. And so even though, we're not necessarily the biggest, we certainly don't work with people to use AI to write their books. We still have to consider where it fits into every single part of the book process. And so that's been a real journey for us and for our clients to work out how can you actually use it to speed things up, to make things easier without losing the pieces of the book process that are so powerful for you as an expert. So yeah, that's kind of where we're sitting. We've been doing lots of work to figure out how do you use it and how shouldn't you use it?
Arrow, and it's such interesting because intellectual property is such a conversation, right now, of like, what is mine, what is not, how do I ethically actually walk the walk of showing what's collaborative between maybe what I've been thinking versus how that is expressed. That's so interesting, Verity. Erin, I'd love to hear on your take, coming from the other end of that, right?
Yes.
Really looking at the legal aspects of it. When you're working with experts, how has AI started to influence what you've got going on?
Wow, I'm trying to figure out how it hasn't influenced what I'm doing. So I was pulled into AI, 3 years ago now, because I'm a copyright lawyer. And so I've traditionally helped experts, turn their expertise into protectable intellectual property assets. So instead of just selling their time, they are creating assets, what Parchelle, of course, does with her clients and Verity does, turn their expertise into assets that they can sell, right? And helping them understand, even if you're a service provider, that your expertise is an IP asset. And so then with the introduction of AI, where they were then concerned about, what does this mean when I'm creating my intellectual property if I'm using AI? And it was a lot in the creation aspect. I mean, a lot of those initial questions were using ChatGPT. I mean, that was where most of us became, as consumers, became aware of it. And that was where a lot of the conversations were around. But as AI has infiltrated basically every tool we use in our workflows, whether it's Adobe or ClickUp or Session Lab or whatever, AI is in everything. My clients who are experts who have corporate clients and they are processing their clients' confidential proprietary data. They may be in high risk industries where they're helping them make employment decisions, they're coaches. And so they need to be not just mindful of whether or not they're using ChatGPT to create content, but also how they're using their clients' proprietary information. And so a lot of what I'm doing is education to make sure they know how to use it legally and ethically. So that's where I've landed mostly now.
I promise you, Erin, every single time we have this conversation, I'm like, oh, yeah, employment stuff. Oh, yeah. Like, we've got to be thinking through kind of, particularly when we're handling sensitive pieces, right?
Yes.
Who's owning the data? How do you know? And I love so much what you said about AI being in everything, but
Yes.
it's so interesting, it seems to me, how slow the information about what we do about it is necessarily matching how fast it's rolled out into every single app that we own.
Absolutely.
For sure, that's something that we've been talking a ton about.
Yes. Every day, my email is filled with announcements of new, just straight up AI tools, but new functions, AI functions on the old tools that we've been using for years, if not decades. So yeah, we have to be mindful of that.
Yeah. And I know, Parchelle, you're feeling it on your end also. When we have conversations with your clients where there's so many new LMS, LXP, the new kind of wave of that. Tell me what it's been looking like from your side, from how AI has been helping you to support with experts or what you've been seeing with AI and expertise.
Yeah, like Erin said, AI has infiltrated every single app. And as someone who produces learning assets, which have a big media component, it has certainly infiltrated that world to where we're able to really create, let's say, the media content, videos, audio, and things of the nature in a much faster pace. And we're seeing that is just allowing us to increase the output, which is really exciting when we think about just the mass distribution of someone's content, as it were. So it's a really amazing tool for repurposing and how we're able to again, share that information widespread. What I would say, it's been interesting to use AI also for us in a way to actually help us to analyze gaps in the learning. So some of the collaboration that we have with AI is helping us to see where is this body of work missing, right? The actual practical application. So that analyst is really good, that helps to inform us how we want to produce the learning. So we're definitely playing around in that regard. And, a lot of our clients are also just intrigued by AI, but also, to our conversation, how do you protect it at the same time? So there's lots of, concerns and questions coming up there that we're, equally wanting to address and to get, more direction on.
Yeah. Love that you said that, Parchelle. When I think about kind of the ways in which I've seen with your clients AI as being so effective, it has been in identifying again what those gaps look like. It's so interesting because so often with experts, as an expert myself, it's like you're so attached to your body of work and you're teaching it a certain way and you're training it a certain way. And then you run it through your favorite AI tool and it gives it back to you. And it's like, oh, there's a gap there. How long has that been there? I've been doing this way for years. Like, oh, there's, like, oh, I could see how certain folks, even with different abilities, right? I can see how certain folks, the accessibility of the way that we may teach it can be drastically upgraded by having a different set of eyes that's looking at mass production. I love that, Parchelle. I think that's so interesting. Verity, I'm interested in coming to you when it comes to kind of the other end of that, when we're talking about authors and we're talking about thought leaders. Like, we're kind of using AI in like a research and gaps perspective. How are you helping folks, or how are you seeing that folks are using AI to kind of clarify their voice rather than like copy a voice?
I think that's a really important distinction, is that it's when you use AI up front to do the thinking for you, you miss out on what makes you great, and you miss out on doing the thinking that's going to improve your thought leadership and actually, bring something unique to the perspective. So that's where I think the distinction that we often use is when it comes to organizing or analyzing information, AI is brilliant. Like, all of those things that are time consuming and boring and no one wants to do, like, those things are so helpful to use AI for. But actually, when it comes to the creativity or, thinking of new ideas, thinking of what you need to do, that has to be you. Otherwise, what you risk is losing out on your unique voice, your unique perspective. And I think you lose the muscle of thinking. Like, when you're letting AI do all the thinking for you, it means that you become less practiced at actually coming up with new ideas and coming up with new perspectives. And so it makes your thought leadership worse over time because you're not in the practice of coming up with new ways to approach something. So I think that's where we always come at it with authors, is like, absolutely use AI. I saw somebody use it really effectively, a friend of ours who has a podcast with 300 episodes. And so he used it to take the transcripts of all of those and go, which stories are applicable to the plan that I've created, and find all of those. Awesome use of AI. Like, that would have taken hours and been so painful. But he first came up with the plan and figured out what was the journey that he wanted to take the reader on, what was the framework, what strategy did he have behind it. And I think that's the really important distinction, is there's thinking that requires you as the expert and as the person, and that you bring some human heart to it as well. And then there's the stuff that you can just speed up by using AI. And so being able to recognize, well, what are the pieces that I need to bring my unique brain and perspective and heart to, and what are the areas that actually it's just about speeding up and making things faster. And knowing the difference is a really important piece of going through the book journey in a way that means that you actually get out of it what you want, what will help you achieve what you want to achieve.
That makes a ton of sense to me. And it interestingly also kind of perks me over to you, Erin, like, as a follow-up to that question.
Waiting to jump in though.
Right? I'm like, I'm tag you in. There's a part of me that then wonders, right, when we're talking about a corporate setting, what processes are proprietary, right? And do you protect process, or is process intellectual property? And when we go through a piece, kind of to Verity's point of, right, like, I love that use case. That's honestly one of the ways that I use AI all the time. It's like, I've got 5,000 transcripts and somewhere there's a needle in a haystack that someone said something somewhere. Please go find it so that we can build a plan or process on that. The process and the plan, is that something that people are making proprietary information? And if so, how does AI work in that world the way that you're seeing it with clients, Erin?
Well, you're gonna make me start with copyright law, so I'm going there.
Bring
And
it.
and just by the way, this is U.S. copyright law. Similar laws are similar regarding copyright in most of the world, but not exactly the same. But with respect to U.S. copyright, so what does copyright protection? So it grants to the owner of the copyright the exclusive rights to a creative work. So something that is original, that has been put in its final format in writing, on film, or on video, recorded, painted, photographed. When it's original, created by a human being, and it's been put in its final form, in its tangible form, it is eligible for copyright protection. And that means that that owner has exclusive rights to how it is exploited, who can copy it, who can perform it if it's a play, who can display it if it's a painting, who can make derivatives, turning a book into a movie. Those rights are exclusively held by the copyright owner. The thing with AI is that little bit about being created by a human. And so when we are using AI as our sole author or our co author, then we have created a work that is not eligible for those copyright protections. It doesn't mean that it's illegal to use it. It might be if it stole somebody else's work, but let's just assume it hasn't stolen someone else's work, but we don't have exclusive rights over it. So somebody else can, kind of make the same request of ChatGPT, let's use it, and it can have a similar output, and it could be basically the same as yours, and you would not have any right to the exclusive use of that work because it was not created by a human. And so, on the one hand, from, the development of your thought leadership, the development of your expertise that Verity is working with, that keeping that muscle strong is really important to not use it for that creative process. From the legal perspective, it's very important not to do that, because if you want to be able to create, multiple revenue streams from something, you kind of want to own it. And in order to own it, you have to have those protections under copyright law, which means it can't be created by AI. And so that is my concern when someone's using AI. I say, like, do not use AI to create your money makers. You want to have exclusive rights to those things. Use it to create, LinkedIn posts, use it to create, whatever, but don't use it to make your money makers. Um, you asked me a question about process.
Mm-hmm.
So generally, process is not protected by copyright. Again, it has to be, it's the expression that is protected, right? Not the mechanics. And so sometimes someone will have like a framework or something like that, depending on how well developed it is. You put it in a book, the book is absolutely protected. But can I read the book, learn your framework, and then go and implement it myself? I can, right? So that's something I've learned. But the expression that you've put down in tangible form is protectable by copyright.
Love. And so I'm hearing that also of, like, let's say you read my book and you finish my framework and you go build, 5 more books out of it. That would be something that I may be able to say, hey, that's against
Yeah,
XYZ copyright conversation. But if I teach it from the front of the room in a blue suit, you can teach something else in the front of a room from a blue suit, because I don't own teaching
that's
from in front of the room with a blue suit.
that's correct. That is correct.
Yeah, I can see that. If you don't mind, Erin, if you would elaborate with me a little bit from the other side of that, right? So we've got the kind of, like, I love what you said about protecting your creative process as a way of making sure that you're kind of protecting the legal aspects of making sure that your IP IP comes along, you know what I mean, and is doing right and is protectable per se, what are some of the steps that you feel like are legal steps that experts should take to protect their content from being misused by AI or scraped by AI?
Well, that depends on where you are using it. So one of the things that I teach, either through workshops or clients, is how to understand the terms of use of the tools that you're using. Every tool has, the things that nobody reads, the links at the bottom, the foot of the page, that tells you whether or not they can use your inputs. So the thing that you put into, put into the tool, whether they can use that as training data. And a lot of times it will depend on whether it's the free version versus a paid version. Some tools don't do that for anything, whether it's free or not, and making sure you really understand whether or not you are giving rights to that AI tool to use your inputs as training data. As far as scraping the internet, you may know that there are a lot of class action lawsuits going on right now. There was I think the first one that had a judgment was Anthropic, which is Claude. So they went through and they scraped the internet. And, a lot of the training data from all these initial tools like OpenAI and Anthropic, all those, they scraped the internet. And they scraped a bunch of books. So a number of authors, I'm sure Verity, sued, and they were found to have infringed their copyright for the books that they did not have own copies of. It was kind of a strange decision, frankly, that they found that it was fair use for the books that they owned legal copies of, but not fair use for books that they didn't own legal copies of. And they have, $1.5 billion judgment, I believe. No doubt it'll be appealed. We'll see, and there are a bunch of others, OpenAI, all of them, Meta, they all are in the middle of lawsuits. And so we'll see. It'll be a while before it all shakes out. But if you have stuff on the internet, it's going to get scraped. I mean, that's just, these are the rules of the internet.
It's interesting.
I think that's where, if I can jump in though, I think that's where it's so important that you have your own unique voice and your own unique kind of content and frameworks and models, whatever it is, because like those are going to be used as training. They're not necessarily going to be pulled exactly as is and used by somebody else. But the way that you keep building thought leadership, the way that you keep building a reputation, the way that you keep attracting clients is by continuing to evolve that thinking. And so if you're always ahead of the AI, essentially, then, nobody else is going to have exactly what you've got as long as you're not feeding it into AI as you're developing it, basically. So I think that's a really important thing. We used to say that, you were fine to share everything because you were always 6 months ahead of your competitors. So if someone wanted to copy you, they're already like way behind. AI has sped that up significantly, but it's still true. If you are constantly being creative and coming up with new ways of thinking and evolving what you're talking about, AI is always going to be behind, and so is everybody who's using AI. So that's why it's so important, I think, to keep using that muscle and keep developing those ideas yourself.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out, Verity, because I did mean to, people think that there's somehow this additional access to your work that wasn't there before, but there's not. It was always available on the internet, right? And it still is. I mean, yes, it's being scraped into these tools that can now process it in seconds, but it's the same access. People have access to anything you've published, and we want them to have access to it. That's how we develop our body of work and become, experts and known for things. But have that, the fact that it's on the internet does not make it public domain. The fact that it's in someone's training data does not make it public domain. You still have your exclusive rights as a copyright owner. So if they spit it back out, as a copy, it is still a copyright infringement. But if they digest it and change it up, and it's original enough that it's not considered a copy, then that was always the case, and that's still true today. So
I love that. And I think that that's so interesting. It's like I used to, when I was working with clients back in the day, I used to say, well, thank goodness we're brilliant. Well, thank goodness you only don't have one idea in your head. Thank goodness it's not the only idea that you have, thank goodness no one's going to look as cute as me in this blue suit in front of the room, whether you try to copy me or not. I think there's also something here so interesting about tripling down on your authenticity and the resonance between you and your audience and the tightness of the relationship between that resonance being so important in the age of AI more than anything. Because even if somebody duplicates something that's really general, your ability to be specific and your ability to actually articulate said expertise, expand on it, create additional, really create honestly the world around it, there's very little that AI can do to compete at the speed with which your human brain and human connection will gather enough information to actually be able to continue to move your expertise. Parchelle, I know this is so your world when it comes to kind of like the distribution of expertise and the innovation and mutation of one bit of body of work and content and how it gets expressed. How are you seeing that in your world, and what's your take on this in regards to quote unquote owning one's expertise at the distribution level?
At the distribution level, I mean, I echo everything that's been said, especially around the fact that we have to be ahead a bit more and really take ownership of our own creativity and make space for that, a space for original thoughts, space for your thoughts to lead. Right, when I think of thought leadership, for whatever reason, my mind pictures someone standing on the edge of a cliff, right, seeing forward into a new territory to an extent, right? Just like you're on the edge of something new and you're leading in that thought. And so if we continue to do that, right, then we can be ahead of AI in those respects. And from a distribution standpoint, it really just encourages more creativity, more originality, more authenticity to come to the table. So that way we're ahead. And that's a discipline of my own that I'm looking to get in more expressed on my end, because I'm usually I take a lot of pride just being sort of the engine behind the distribution of that work. And as I'm looking into my own self for the expertise of my own, like these are just very timely conversations and things to be considering, and how to just continue to build that muscle of how we're expressing our thoughts and our expertise. One of my favorite books that I read is called The Business of Expertise by David C. Baker. And in there, he talks about how basically, like, as an expert, or expressing your expertise, he said basically we should always be prepared to, what he says, drop and give 20, right? Drop and give 20 thoughts, ideas, something new. Like we should be prepared to go with something, and to share something that is relevant from our experience and our expertise. And that always stuck with me, right? And that's the muscle that I kind of hear is necessary when we think about distributing more and being more in that place of sharing our thought leadership.
Love. Verity, I'm interested in kind of turning to you in that lane. We're talking about accessibility, right? And in the idea that your stuff is everywhere. How does one remain an expert? How do they stand out when your expertise is so accessible, do you think?
I think that's part of it. I think to be an expert, well, no, you can be an expert and your ideas can be totally inaccessible. But if you want to contribute positively to the world, you need your ideas to be accessible, to be available to people. And so I think that's a really important piece of it. But it's that constant learning is the really important muscle. It's the learning, it's the reflecting back, it's the evolving what you're doing. And one of the reasons that I love the book process so much is because somebody will start with an idea for a book, and where they end up, say 12 months later, by the time they've finished the book, is just so far ahead where they were when they started that it just gives them this immense confidence to keep growing and evolving, because the process of having to work through your thinking and having to communicate it in a different way, having to dive deeper into it and tell more stories and research and do all of that stuff just takes you so much further. And so I often say, like, actually, if you're not a little bit embarrassed by what you put out 5 years ago, then you probably haven't evolved and learned enough. And I think that that's just a piece of it, is you always want it to be accessible, but you also always want to keep evolving and growing. And that's how you stay an expert, is looking for, it's never, I created this one thing and I just scaled the whole business and I never changed it and I did all of that. Like, that's fine. That's a business model, sure. But if you want to build thought leadership, if you want to be an expert, if you want to keep building expertise, you have to keep evolving and working that muscle and sharing what you're learning.
Oh, I love that. And I think that it's so interesting to something that you said previously that reminds me of wrapping around to what you just said is around the speed, right? I think if I'm honest, a lot of folks, we've gotten, a little complacent, a little lazy. Well, I wrote the book. I put it out already. I made the course. There's 5 people through it, right? And it's 5 years later, and it's like, things are starting to dry up. As a business strategist, I see this very often. Things are starting to dry up in the money bank, and so folks aren't necessarily getting the same level of results that they got before. And oftentimes, I really do think that it's to your point of like, the world also has AI. So the accelerated process of information needing to get out is imperative. Like you needing to grow and evolve with a little bit more speed with the world is going to be a little bit more imperative. And your business models likely need to adjust. Your bodies of work likely need to adjust. Like the way in which you're sharing the language likely needs to adjust, right? I think about things like A Course in Miracles or The Artist's Way, these like solid bodies of work that people have been working with for years and years and years, but have innovated, have had so many different, moments of being heightened and digitized and undertized and in group and all of these different ways. Like, there's so much that can be innovated upon when we don't lose innovation in the world of AI. I feel like that's something that's being loud upon, kind of like a theme of this conversation, is like, you can't go to sleep at the wheel in the world of AI at this place. I'm really seeing it that way. I'm interested to kind of tap onto you, Parchelle, on this kind of question. When we're talking about the business elements, right? And we're talking about like creating the things necessary to leverage and distribute said expertise. Where do learning assets fall in, and how does it set people up to be able to continue to innovate in that way?
Oh man, learning assets are basically, to me, the extension of the body of work in ways that are experienced, ideally and in its best form. And those assets from a business perspective take on a very, I think, new place of empowerment for a lot of experts, simply because each of those literally are like assets, kind of like real estate properties to an extent, right? They literally are things that you can leverage and stack and, move things around, as it were, for how you want to, contribute. That was like another word I just heard say, like, how do you want to contribute and how do you want those to show up? And from a business perspective, the learning assets just set you apart in that respect. They also, depending on how they are created, right? Because I think experience is very, very key nowadays. But depending on how it's created, the end result of what the user walks away with is now becoming more powerful, and it's becoming more important. In other words, like, people getting what they paid for with the learning is now becoming that much more essential. And so I think about the learning assets, again, just as a place for extending the real essence of the body of work for people, for it to live in their lives in unique ways. And when it comes to learning assets, I want to be clear. It's not just online courses or a book that's going to extend into a private podcast. Could be a digital workbook, a digital worksheet, actual physical worksheets. All of these are learning assets, and they create a journey in a world through your body of work. And so it definitely just ups that level, and I think makes the expert that much more irreplaceable, as it were, or it creates a different connection point with the users and with those that are wanting to learn from that expert. So I just see definitely that there's just so much opportunity when we consider how we learn from the body of work as like a gateway for more revenue, more impact, and just more contribution across the board.
Love. And I love that little hallway of more revenue, more impact, more contribution, because I kind of think it's so interesting. We're kind of getting also into a conversation around packaging genius, right? And like all of the things that make you a good steward of your genius and your thought leadership, because it really is about, expertise is interesting because it's so personal and so unique to you, yet the act of sharing it is that thought of like, I want to make it easier, better, stronger, faster for the person coming after me and behind me. I want to make it, one step easier for the person to learn, or whatever that looks like. And your genius and how you fell and scraped your knees and stood back up, and your thought kind of around that is kind of a part of it. And it's so interesting with you, Parchelle, specifically, because it's been so interesting learning with and from you around all of the different ways that video and media can be used. An audio clip used as a learning asset can be used in so many different ways. Video can be used in so many different ways to articulate that conversation that's so different than like the voice and tone that comes along when I sit with a book and read, versus kind of the experience that I have sitting in a workshop in a corporate space, right? It's like each of these, and I see so many experts, that come with us that literally make their way through every single rung kind of on the ladder of the many different ways in which genius can be kind of expressed. Erin, I think I want to come to you first. I would love to hear this question from all of you all as we kind of navigate into the last pieces here. What do you feel like are the personal qualities or practice that really helps keep someone's genius unmistakably theirs out in the wild while they are doing the thing?
Well, I'm going to come back to, creating protectable assets. I mean, when we have the protection of the laws, federal laws behind us, we own those that work exclusively. And that's why it's so important to make sure that we are, translating our expertise into actual assets. You talked about, different ways you can deliver your expertise to the end client. And one of the ways to scale, of course, is to create, different tools and products that can help deliver some or all of the value that you provide to your clients through ways other than you being in the room, right? We create these assets so that you don't have to always be in the room for someone to get the benefit of your expertise. And so someone who is good, at doing this is someone who's able to sit down and do the work either alone or with the assistance of someone like the ladies here, to turn it into those assets. And that's really key. I mean, there's just not another way to decouple your, the sharing of your expertise from you being in the room, unless you're creating those assets. So
you heard it here first.
Yes.
You heard it, people. I hope you wrote it down. Your favorite IP lawyer, Erin Austin, just told you, create a protectable asset. Create a protectable asset. And what I heard behind what she said is do the steps after that to go protect it. Because you can make the asset, but we have to also go about the business of making sure that that asset is protected. Erin, anything that you want to say, kind of ending that thought around ways in which you want to make sure that people think about when protecting said asset?
We should always be protecting said asset. I mean, I want to simplify the process of protection, because creation and putting it in concrete form is the protection, right? You don't, like, yes, if you can register it too, but under US copyright law at the moment of creation, it is protected. And so we want to make sure that we are thinking from the beginning, at the beginning, like think of, I don't know how many of us are, corporate refugees, when we went out on our own and we kind of just sold our time, right? We didn't have anything. Like, you got something for me to review, I'll review, you want me to, write, you want whatever you need it. And you just, performed labor, created a deliverable, handed it to your client, and you didn't own anything. And then at some point you're like, okay, I've been doing this for quite some time. I'm going to create some templates around it. I'm going to create, some framework around it, or I'm going to, start to create a course out of it. I'm going to write a book about it. As you develop your expertise, then you'll start to create those assets naturally, but making sure that you aren't thinking that it's another day or later on that I'm going to protect them. As you're doing those client agreements, that when you're bringing training to them, make sure that you're reading that client agreement and you understand the rights that you're granting to your client. Are you saying that they're going to get all the rights in your training, or are you only giving them permission to use the training because it's yours and you're going to keep it and continue to exploit it? If you are using subcontractors, make sure you have something in writing with them. The default under US copyright law is that the human being who created the thing owns it. So it doesn't matter if you commission the subcontractor to create it and you paid them for it. If there's nothing in writing, they own it. You don't. Make sure you are mindful of these things from the beginning so that as you're building your body of work, you have a clean chain of title, so to speak. So I don't have to come in and clean it up later. So.
Friends, I hope you're listening. This is why you need a lawyer friend. This is why you need a lawyer friend. This is why we hire a lawyer, because until you don't know you need it until you need it. But it's things like that I'm always like, ooh.
Yeah. Oh, I want to just add one because people do this a lot, is the collaboration. And we love to collaborate. And we're creating joint works. And there are a whole set of rules about how ownership works with collaboration if you don't have an agreement in place. I'm just gonna throw that out there and make sure that you are
conversation. Next panel. That's a whole conversation. Oh. Okay, Verity, I'm throwing it to you in that lane for our authors and our thought leaders that are knowing that the book is their lane and their place to express their genius. What do you feel like are a personal quality or a practice that really helps someone keep their genius unmistakably theirs in the writing process?
I think there are a few things. So first and foremost is starting with the end in mind. So like we start all of our clients with a really strong strategy of what do they actually want to achieve with this book, both for them, but also for their readers. Like, why are they writing it in the first place? Because you don't want to spend hours and hours and quite a bit of money sometimes writing this book only for it to sit in a box in your garage because you haven't figured out what you're going to do with it. You want to be really clear on that. So I think that's a really important piece, is being really clear up front on what the vision for the book is, who the audience is, how you want to use it, what you want it to do for you and for them. The other piece though, and it actually harks back to what Parchelle was saying before around, I think it's really important that now that we're in a world where information is everywhere, like we are not short on information, we are getting thrown information the whole time. Information is not your expertise. Like information, you knowing a lot of stuff is not what makes you an expert. You knowing how to take that information and help somebody make a change or transform in some way, that's what makes you an expert. And so I think having somebody who is able to look at who am I trying to help? What am I trying to help them do? And what's the journey that I'm trying to take them on? Which in a book, there's an obvious journey. They start at one point and they end at the other point. And that's what we're always looking at, is how are you taking your reader on that journey? But I think in whatever you do with thought leadership, what makes you an expert is how you can help people transform. It's not actually the fact that you know a lot of stuff.
Oh, this is a good one, Verity. Again, this is why, get your favorite book coach, Verity, to have a conversation about your writing process, because I do think that, I don't know if you feel this, but I kind of feel like 15, 20 years ago, there was not enough information out so people could just give information. We've kind of passed that time. Like we're in a different conversation. There's the level up has happened, and either you're going to get on the level or kind of get left behind, unless you're talking about something that no one knows about and you can't find on the internet. And those things are becoming fewer and farther between.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I think it's why sometimes when you go back and read books from 20 years ago, you go, this is really boring. because all they were doing was giving you information. And now we're used to reading, now if we're going to read a book, we want it to actually do something for us. We want it to change our lives, change our minds. And so that's what you've got to do if you want to write yours.
Oh, I love that. And to that same lane, Parchelle, the same question's coming your way. I know that we spend so much time talking about motivating people to educate themselves, right? Versus trying to inundate them with information so that they learn, right? Motivating the environment and creating the experience necessary such that someone will actually want to be motivated to take some action and want to transform some things in their life. I would love to know from your perspective, when we're thinking about thought leadership and when you're thinking about producing experts, what are some of the qualities that you see or that you have seen, or some of the practices that you've seen that keep someone's genius uniquely theirs?
To me, y'all, it's stories and experience. I'm an experienced person. You can say all day long, yeah, I've been studying this and I know all this information, like we said, but to me, it's a different thing when you've walked the walk and talked the talk, and you can look back and say, hey, there's a hole here, there's a big old blunder over here. Like, you can really advise and, contribute and giving back. And I feel like when it comes to us sharing, and as experts, as we're sharing our thought leadership, don't discount the beauty of your story, and that you actually had, real life case stories and studies, as it were, that kind of show that you've seen this before. And when you present those stories, it is something that automatically distinguishes you. There's only your story and only your experience. And so that's always for me been a distinguishing factor when I go to produce. It's like, they might be saying something similar as this person over here, but I want to make sure they tell their story about when it happened to them, and that being incorporated into the learning as well, because we learn through stories, and there's such a beauty there in us being able to do that and to reflect and share our own stories. Because again, I'm someone who's like, I think it's one of my friends calls them receipts. It's like, where are the receipts of the expertise, as it were, the experience, right, that you can bring to the table? And I feel like those experiences, hands down, differentiate.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I think that that's something, it's so old and new, right? As we're thinking about like this very generative conversation and like innovative about AI and what's the future, isn't it amazing that we're going back to tell a really good story, be really good at articulating the thing that was done, the same thing that we did around campfires for time and millennia, is the thing that tends to be the balm in a time of being overly technologically advanced, to where you're losing some of the human. And I think something that you said, Parchelle, also really speaks to me in the lane of trust. It's really easy for me to trust someone when they tell me the receipts of what it is that they did and tell me how it worked and articulate it in a way that I can maybe see it in my world and even try it on a little bit, right? Where it's not just facts and data. It's like, oh, a real human had this experience. Could I, as someone who's receiving this, also have said experience? I love that. I love that. Man, okay, as we're landing the plane, friends, so I hope that this conversation inspired you as you all are listening, right? I know all of us are navigating this AI world. These experts on this call are truly looking at it from the lens of handling expertise through it. I would love for us to complete one sentence as we navigate ourselves out from each of you all. And Parchelle, since you left this off, I actually will start with you. Complete this sentence. To teach what you know and own what you create in a world of AI, you must.
You must create. Keep creating. That's what I say. Keep creating, and that creation keeps us ahead, for sure. That's what I would say.
Love. Erin, coming to you. To teach what you own and own what you create in a world of AI, you must
pay attention to the contracts.
I was so hoping you were going to say that at some point today. Read the fine print, people.
Yes, right. Please.
Right? Or be resourced that somebody in your world can read the fine print on your behalf. Hello? Love. Yeah. Love. For our authors and our thought leaders, Verity, for you, please complete the sentence. To teach what you know and own what you create in a world of AI, you must
keep doing the thinking yourself.
No one's getting out of creativity. I love it. I love it. Human creativity is not going anywhere. AI isn't going anywhere. So us being able to navigate our relationship with it is something that everybody should really be thinking about, particularly if you know you are someone who is sitting on expertise, or you're a part of teams that bring expertise to the world. These are things to be thinking about, and something I am just kind of present to after hearing you all on this conversation and getting my brain sparking about things is how much more is possible in the world of innovation that we haven't even touched yet. We haven't even been 100 years of computers per se. You know what I mean? I think math. Don't quote me.
I remember.
Yeah, my God. A couple grandmas from computers. Like You know, we've got so much more available, and so many thoughts that haven't been thunk, so many ways in which to share things that we haven't explored. So much more innovation is possible, and you don't just need AI to do it. This is a good time to get creative and expansive about how your thought leadership wants to live in the world, who it really matters for, and how they need to hear it, and getting really invested in the long haul of what innovation can look like around this space. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Parchelle. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Verity. Thank you, listeners, for listening in. You can catch this live or catch us on the replay. I want to thank you for watching. I hope you have a really wonderful rest of your Monday. I feel like we're going to be back with some new panels. So I think this is the conversation we're going to be having. Okay, great. Keep an eye out for us for next rounds of things, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Portia.
Portia.